If you're asking yourself to do big things, you've got to fuel yourself in a big way. And that could be walks in the morning. It could be just 15 minutes of quiet time with your coffee. It could be a 15-minute quiet lunch.
So, welcome to the You Are a Lawyer podcast. Dina Cataldo, how are you today?
I am fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Although I was kind of complaining when we first got on here, but I'm actually having a really good day. I am. So Dina, how did you find You Are a Lawyer, and would you tell me about what you do every day?
Well, I found you just because I love looking at different podcasts that lawyers listen to, and I stumbled upon yours. And one of the things that I do is work with lawyers specifically as a coach to help them with time management, overcoming overwhelm, and growing their practice so that they don't feel overwhelmed. It actually feels doable and they can have a life.
Well, a lot of lawyers would say, are we allowed to have lives? Is that something that we should aspire to? How did you start working with these lawyers? Like, what was the thing that you saw and you were like, I think I need to step in and help?
Well, I was a criminal prosecutor for a little over 15 years. And one of the things that I experienced was at 29, I was just a few years into my trial career, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when I went to take a break for chemotherapy and radiation, I realized that chemo felt like I was taking a vacation. And it really dawned on me that the way I had been practicing the law was literally killing me. And I felt horrible and I didn't realize it because the anxiety and overwhelm became so normalized in my body. I thought that's just the way life was until I had that moment to quote unquote take a break and realize, oh, that's not how my life needs to feel. And so at that point, I went on this trial and error journey of figuring out, how do I make money as a lawyer, right? Because I had just graduated 3 years ago, and figure out how to do this and feel what I felt while I was on chemo, which was peaceful and really present. So I had been working on that, and it really took me on this journey of discovering what it was that I enjoyed. And it was years later that I discovered coaching and discovered that I had what I see now as my gift of coaching lawyers the way that I do. And it was not an overnight thing. It definitely took that trial and error, but that's what got me here.
Yeah. So I hope you don't mind me asking, are you doing better now with your health? Are you in
Oh my
remission?
gosh. Yes. As a matter of fact, and I will share this with you, I healed cancer holistically recently. I had a diagnosis and everything is clear because I went on a 2-week water fast and I did all of that good stuff. And so I'm a big believer in fasting and holistic practices. And over the years, I've really changed everything about my diet. Again, over the years, no longer have sugar or processed foods. And that was something that was a contributing factor into reoccurrence.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said this, and it keeps ringing in my mind. You were on chemotherapy, and that
Mm-hmm.
felt like a vacation,
Mm-hmm.
which is terrifying because you're going through something that, that's when you're like, oh, wow, I really enjoy life, and now it could be cut short. Wait, and that part feels like a vacation. What a wake up call.
Yeah, it didn't even cross my mind like, oh, and this could be over. Like when I was experiencing the peace, it was just peace. And it was, when I look back at it, the best thing that ever happened to me is having that experience, because it allowed me to see that there was another way of living, which I didn't have access to. I was been living the way I'd been living for so long. And when I had that time out, I really got this realization that I needed to find things that lit me up. And I realized I didn't know what those things were because I had been working so much.
Mhm. And you were a district attorney, which is definitely a noble profession. You're helping all kinds of people. Did you know lawyers? Did you grow up with lawyers?
No, I was a first generation lawyer, first generation college. My dad didn't graduate high school. My mom graduated, but I really went into the legal profession because I wanted something that was stable, something that was secure, where I would be making money. My parents really didn't make much money growing up. And so I really wanted to break that history and create a life where I had financial abundance. But the only thing I knew how to do was work really, really hard because that's what I saw my parents doing growing up. I didn't realize there was another way where I could manage my time. I could manage myself in a way where I felt peace and not stressed out and working all night. And that was something that I learned from coaching and learning from not even the lawyers in the DA's office, because they didn't have those skills. They certainly couldn't teach that to me. I had to actually go out into other circles, like entrepreneurial circles, to understand that you could completely re-energize your life. You could completely change things if you just started taking one foot in front of the other and making tiny tweaks. And that's what I started doing.
I love the initiative, right? You're like, if nothing else, I can control my own effort and I know I can work hard.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it was to your kind of detriment because you were working all these
Right.
hours and you're like, I only have so much time.
Yeah.
So, did that get kind of hard for you to look around and kind of realize you needed help? Because by all means, everyone was like, no, Dina, you're successful. And you're like, no, but
Right.
I'm drowning.
Right. So here's what's so funny. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase like one trick pony, right? When you only know one trick, which is working harder, that's all you know how to do. But you will expend the energy. And people around me, they were all overwhelmed and stressed out too. And so what I needed to do was start looking for models of people who were successful that weren't stressed out. That was not something that I found right away. What I discovered is that the first thing I needed to do was just carve out just a little bit of time for me to learn something new. And that meant me listening to podcasts on business, because there was a moment that I had, as I was kind of discovering what I enjoyed, what I wanted to do, where I started journaling and I would make these little mini bucket lists. And one day I went back and I looked at these little mini bucket lists that I'd kind of like done over a period of several months. And I kept seeing start a business on them. And I was like, really? Why do I start a business? But why do I want that? Because I didn't like watching my dad go through that because he had his own business. Why do I want to do that? And I said, well, I think it could be fun. It was that little voice, right? And I was like, well, why am I not doing it? And it said, my little voice said, because you're scared. And I said, oh, interesting. And I had been doing yoga just long enough for me to see, oh, wait a minute, when we're scared, that means it's something that we should move towards. So I said, all right, well, what can I do? And I initially started a loose leaf tea business. Like I said, okay, I can start it online. I can do it in a short amount of time each week, right? I can, learn how to do this. And I started applying that energy that I had totally focused to the office, and I took a little bit of it and I put it towards this business and listening to podcasts. Amy Porterfield was one that I used to listen to, and she really got me understanding that I had other possibilities of different directions I could take my life. And then she led me to other people who knew how to manage their time really well. And I started listening to them and I started learning about coaching. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this magical thing? So I started applying some of that to my life, saw that it worked. And then I started to recognize, hey, I created a business I don't actually like. Like, I don't like having a physical product. I don't necessarily want to be tied down to this model that I currently have. And I'm not really energized towards growing this in any way where I'm hiring people or learning how to drop ship and all that stuff. I'm like, that does not interest me at all. So I said, well, what do I know? And I said, well, I know time management and now I know some coaching. So that's what took me towards what I do now with lawyers, which just really evolved over that span of time and figuring things out for myself.
Yeah. And I think that is the path of an entrepreneur. You
Mm-hmm.
have to take that baby risk and then it's like did you enjoy it? Did you not? And then do you give yourself permission to take another risk or do you give yourself permission to say I still enjoy tea. I don't have to distribute it.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me too, because a lot of lawyers, when we start something, I think we, at least this was me, really pride ourselves on completion. And right? So when I decided that I wanted to go into coaching, it really hit my pride needing to look at, okay, what do I want to decide? Because I don't have unlimited energy. And closing down the tea business for me, it was hard because it was almost like telling myself I failed, but I had to reimagine that. I needed to look at that differently because it wasn't that I failed, it was that I learned everything that I needed to learn from that experience, and I could move on into a direction that I really loved that I just didn't know about before. So if anyone's listening to this and they're kind of making that choice, they're like, how do I know that I'm not quitting because I'm a failure, and I should be putting more energy into something versus moving into a new direction? Ask yourself, is this what you truly want? Can you picture yourself doing this 5 years out? Right? Is this something that you enjoy, or do you see something else that you can imagine 5 years out that being even bigger and impacting more people in a positive way? Because I love tea, but it was not going to positively impact people the same way coaching was. Like, I have to be honest about that. Like, there's plenty of tea out there. It's not changing my life. And I think that when we get really clear on our goals and what we want to accomplish in our life, then those kinds of decisions become easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny to be a host because I'm listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, don't forget that. And then I'm also like, no, but your words right now are still really, really good. So I want to go back to the entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
Being a lawyer is stressful. It doesn't matter if it is criminal, if it is family, if it is money, if it is corporations, it is stressful. Entrepreneurship is stressful. But you mean to tell me you found entrepreneur coaches because that was less stressful than being a lawyer and they helped you manage your time? That there's multiple layers there.
Yeah, let me start with this one. Being a lawyer is not inherently stressful. It's just not. And I thought it was for a long time. So it made perfect sense to me when we feel like people are coming at us, work is coming at us, when we're taking that approach to life, then yes, it does feel stressful. But when we begin to step into the most empowered version of ourselves that can take control of a situation, whether it's time management, whether it's boundaries with clients, whether it's boundaries with people we love, then it's not just inherently stressful. I always want to look at, why do I feel stress? And I never tell myself it's because of something outside of myself or I have no power. But if I say, okay, why am I feeling stressed out here? And I can say, okay, what about what I'm doing here? What I'm thinking here is creating this stress. Then I have power. So I can say, okay, I'm feeling stressed out. I'm feeling overwhelmed. What's going on here with me? And I said, well, I haven't given myself a break yet today. I honestly haven't even written down what my priorities are today. So my brain can't focus. Or, I let that client walk in my door and said yes, when really my intention today was to focus on another project that needed to get done. What I could have done is said, I really do want to help you with this, but at this moment, I can't do that. Let's make an appointment to talk later this afternoon or tomorrow. Does that sound good? Right? Like, just saying that and taking the reins in our life can empower us so much. And yes, there are client emergencies, things that happen that you want to take care of. Is like, instead of saying, oh my gosh, there was an emergency and I don't have control of my time, saying, no, I made a decision to prioritize that client's needs because they needed something immediately. And then I decided to shift what I was doing this morning to this afternoon. Much more empowering. It reduces the mental drama and the stress drastically. And that's a big part of the work that I do with my clients, because when you don't feel empowered and you feel like a victim in your practice, yeah, you're going to feel stressed all the time, but it does not have to be that way.
I love that. I love the reframing of that. It reminds me of a book called The Big Leap with the author Gay
Yeah.
Hendricks. And I
Yeah.
just picked that up to read it again because he's one of my favorite authors. And everyone talks about zone of genius. That's a big part of the book. But my favorite part is where he says, you create time.
Yeah.
If you are stressed, if you are worried, if you are rushing, that's on you. You get to decide how much time you're going to spend on this, how many things you're going to do. And to your point, you get to say, I'm already working on 3 or 4 things. I am not going to add another thing to my plate. right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really good for especially younger lawyers because we're so used to saying, like, oh, I'll do it. Oh, sure. Okay. Of course, of course, of course. When we should be saying, hey, partner, when would you like this done? Or, hey, did you remember that you already gave me three things?
Yes.
What's the priority of these tasks? And it
Yes.
took me a long time to learn how to do that, even with clients and even with being able to tell them, like, you're fantastic, but you're not the right client for me right now, or
Mhm.
whatever. Um, there is a practice to that. And I don't think it necessarily came naturally to me. So I love that you work with other lawyers and you help them learn how to do that.
I don't think it comes naturally to any lawyer. I mean, if it does, I haven't met that lawyer. But when we go into these law practices, I think it's important to keep in mind these are highly structured places that have a history of a certain way of doing things. And also, we're in a society that really prioritizes the appearance of success. And in legal practices, how that translates is you are going to be successful only if you sacrifice yourself for everybody else. And I think as women, especially, we get this message, but I see it with men too that I work with, is we're last on the to-do list. If we maybe have a scrap of time, we might get something. But one of the things I share with the lawyers I work with, and I want to share with your listeners, is that the practice that we can get into to help us with stress, with overwhelm, with putting ourselves last on the to do list is putting ourselves first and putting yourself first on the calendar. And you're going to feel guilty about it. You're going to feel horrible. You're going to think you're a horrible person and do it anyway. Because when you start doing that, you start to feed yourself. And if you're asking yourself to do big things, you've got to fuel yourself in a big way. And that could be walks in the morning, it could be just 15 minutes of quiet time with your coffee. It could be a 15-minute quiet lunch. It could be instead of having back to back meetings, starting to schedule your meetings instead of an hour to 50 minutes. So you have 10-minute breaks to write your notes and go to the restroom. Like there's so many forms this could look like. But when you start prioritizing what you want, you will begin to curb the overwhelm. You will be able to take more control over your life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Dina, you have been reading my journal.
How did you know?
So I was telling you that I record with guests during the day and I also start podcasts for other people. So I manage those. I manage the guest relationship and I do a bunch of stuff. So now I do still have a 9 to 5, but it's working within my own business. And so I don't want to take the energy and do these things at 9 p.m. So I've started getting up at 6 in the morning and my daughter doesn't wake up till about 7:45.
Mm.
And I have that time. And let me tell you, the first 4 days were so difficult because I did like a 6:30 and then a 6:15 and then finally 6. But I started jumping up and now my body wakes me up around 5:50 in the morning before my
Nice.
alarm even goes off because I know that that's my sacred time and I crave it. I absolutely crave it. And so I love that. I love that you were teaching people how to do this because I kind of had to force myself because I was like, okay, Kyla, you say you're going to do it at night. You don't do it. You lay in bed, you read a
Mm.
book, you go to sleep because your body's tired. Do it in the morning and you have no excuse. And plus, you're giving yourself all that super fresh energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Well, I love how you talk about that because I think as high performers, really driven people, lawyers tend to just beat themselves up and tell themselves it's impossible, they're failures, they just can't do it. Only because at some point in their life, they got used to kind of like smacking themselves over the head like, oh, that's going to work if I just keep beating myself up about it. I'll work harder. And that's where that dread comes in. If you've ever experienced dread, you're like you wait till the last minute to do things. But you actually noticed, you didn't go into that, or at least that's not what your experience was that night, and you said, wait a minute, well, how do I solve for this problem? And you solved for the problem instead of going into what is really easy for us to get into, which is you can't do it. Why do you stink? Why are you so bad at this? All those horrible things we tell ourselves. But if everything is solvable, everything has a solution. We just have to step back and have that conversation with ourselves to say, honey, like I like to say that to myself, honey, how are you doing today? Like, why aren't you doing this? What's going on, sweetie? Right. And then you'd be like, well, I'm just tired. I don't want to do this at night. You're like, okay, well then when else can we do it? Like that's really the process, but so few of us take that time to just have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for this. I wasn't planning on this to be my own coaching, but I appreciate it. So, do you work with clients nationwide, worldwide, or only in
Worldwide, yeah.
California? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And then, is there a mandate that they have to be prior lawyers or law students or anything like that?
It's interesting. I haven't had that come up because my marketing is so specific towards lawyers. It really would depend. And I really, it would, for private coaching, I only take on clients who are driven to succeed and they want to create something that is bigger than them. Maybe they feel too overwhelmed to do that now, or maybe they don't even have that vision yet. That could be something that is morphed, but depending on a person. But I only take lawyers, like specifically only lawyers, and they've got to be actively practicing in my program called Timepiece for Lawyers, which helps specifically for time management.
Yeah, that's a great title, Timepiece for Lawyers.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So I started working with a therapist when I was working at a big law firm
Ah, sounds
because
like the
I
right
was
time to
like,
do that.
yeah. So I'm like, hey, I've been doing a great job. They now want me to manage other people. I'm not interested in that. I'm a solo performer. I just want to implement. And she's like, hey, okay, let's talk about your childhood. That's not why I'm here. I wanted to talk about this. But I had also started the podcast while I was at that firm.
Mm,
And I interviewed about 18 coaches
mm,
before I even entertained the idea of a coach. And I'm saying all this backstory to say, what would you say to someone who is like, I don't need a coach? What would someone else be able to teach me? Why can't I fix it? Because that was my hang up
mm.
for a long time. Even I
Yeah.
just could not see therapy as the same way as coaching.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I probably have at least 3 coaches a year because I have a business scale coach or I have a management coach. Or, you know what I mean? You have different
Mm,
types. But that was my hang up. So, what would you say to
yeah.
someone who was like, oh, Dina sounds cool, but I don't need that?
I was in the same position, and it was really that I was taught that I need to be independent, that I can do anything myself. But I took that to the extreme because the most successful people in this world never do anything by themselves. They all have coaches. This is what I discovered when I got into entrepreneurship. All those people with multiple $1 million businesses, they had coaches, multiple coaches. It wasn't as if they were doing anything on their own. They were getting help. So that is what even got me in to this mode of thinking of maybe getting a coach. And then I just had to get myself on board with, well, do I have the results that I want now? No. Can maybe somebody who knows a little bit more than me get me on a path that's a little quicker than what I would do on my own? Yeah. It was tough because I was the kind of person who didn't even want to ask questions of my supervisors. I was like, no, 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 no. I don't want anyone to think I'm stupid. I want everybody to think I know all the answers. But that didn't make any sense. Why would I have all the answers? It just, we, none of us have all of the answers off the top of our head if we're just on this journey, right? Even if you're way down the path on this journey, there are things, blind spots that we have that we need other people's perspectives on. So if you're in that boat, if you're listening to this, I highly recommend just releasing all of those beliefs and just try one, because what's the worst that can happen? Honestly, it's like your life's going to be better no matter what.
Yeah, I whenever I talk to my husband about coaching and therapy and stuff like that, I'm like, think about your favorite football player. Even if they have natural abilities, to get to the next level, someone had to pull more out of them. They have to have a coach. And then they have different layers of coaches. Right? You
Yes.
got an offensive line coach, you have a this coach, you have a that coach. Like, it's not just one. And if that powerful, strong, important person can do it,
Yeah. Well, I always look at like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. Those are two of my favorite examples because they were so heavy on the mindset. That's why they excelled. And because they had strong minds, that's why they could perform the way they did. And then when you fail, which you will fail at things, you will be able to bounce back faster. And that's what I learned is key is that, oh, I need to be able to manage my mind when I don't hit my goals, because if I can't manage my mind through not hitting my goals, I'm either going to give up or I'm going to put my foot on the brake and I'm not going to do it again. And I'm going to lose all the lessons from that failure. And so, something somebody told me early on in my career is you're going to learn more from your losses at trial than you are at your wins. Like, you've got to lose a lot in order to get the wins that you want. and a coach is going to help you navigate those.
Yeah, I love that. I saw someone online say that entrepreneurship was failing daily.
Yeah.
I was like, I can see that. There's always something.
Yeah, Sarah Blakely, she had a dad who every day after school would ask her like, "Okay, tell me what your fails were." Like he wanted to hear like 3 fails every day. I think that's what it was. And I'm like, "Wow, what a mindset to celebrate the fact that you put yourself out there and you failed at something, maybe you got the wrong answer and you raised your hand, that kind of a thing." You're like, "Oh, that's what it means to be an entrepreneur, is to be able to have the resilience and to celebrate yourself and to learn from those fails and then keep moving forward."
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think I'm going to put that into my own practice with my kiddo, but then also like at the end of every day, like, what did you fail at? Just like write on my own calendar, like just real
Yeah.
quick. I love that.
Yeah, and it does show if you've made progress, because if you're not
Mm-hmm.
failing, you're not making progress.
Or what if you keep failing at the same thing and it's like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, what am I not seeing? What is there another angle I can look at this from?"
And I like the fact that it's decriminalizing failure in a way. It's like it is a basic part of our life. It is something that we do habitually. It is something
Yeah.
that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, even if this is something I did for a while, is at the end of the day, I celebrated 10 things, and those 10 things could be fails. Like, it'd be like, "Oh, you know what? I posted something, I sent out an email and nobody responded, you know, or I did this thing and even though it scared me, I did it." So, those kinds of things, when we're celebrating ourselves, it starts to rewire our brain to allow us to feel good about doing the things that we are doing to grow a business. And they are going to include things that are incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay, so Dina, I always ask every single guest, what is something that you would say to young lawyers, 5 years practicing or less, or law students about what they can do with their law degrees?
Oh my gosh. It's so fascinating. You can do anything with your law degree. You could go into coaching. You could go into, gosh, I want to say politics, but I really don't want to encourage anybody to. But you could, right? You can go and you can do all kinds of things. I've had clients who've gone on to become yoga teachers, clients who've gone on to have like this relationship coaching practice. Like, they've left the law after being a partner to do this. And I want anyone listening to know that you can do this at any time in your career. I started coaching in my late 30s, and I actually left the law in 2022. So I'm 44 now. So you can do it at any age. You can just leave. You can do what you want to do, and you can just start somewhere, right? You don't have to leave the law, and you can actually take baby steps so that you are actually creating an income for yourself and creating that stability that you want, and then you can leave.
Dina, I love that. I think that is excellent advice. Don't burn the ships. If it's time for you to move on, if you have learned everything you've learned, that's okay. That's okay. And then you can go on and you can teach someone else or they can learn from your experience. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today. I know the audience is going to absolutely love this. And where can everyone find you?
I have a podcast too called Be a Better Lawyer. You can find me on Instagram, Dina.Cataldo, and on LinkedIn. Those are the places to really find me and learn more about whether or not working with me or what listening to me is resonating with you.
Yeah. We'll have to do a part 2 and talk about the podcast. I spaced. And Dina, I will see you around social media.
Thank you so much. And my website's dinacataldo.com.
Thank you.
All right.
Alrighty.
Bye.